Whoop-a-doo! What is up, my friends? My name is LuKiKi, and today, instead of another basic little tutorial, I thought it'd be cool to do a breakdown of my recent entry into a remix competition for the song Open by Minder. And I thought this was a really nice little track with a very pretty, well-recorded vocal. And I thought, what the hell? Let's give it a go. Let's try our own little spin on this guy. And you can find my remix on Metapop. There's only about 11 more hours until they pick winners at the time of recording this video. So, I don't know, my track's doing pretty good. I'm excited to see what happens. Hopefully I'm one of the 3 winners. So, let's hop right into our project. And before I dive into anything, let's have a quick listen to the track.
What is good for you is good for me, is good, so I am feeling deeper. Wanna go deeper. I've been thinking about you. Tell me any problems, 'cause I can really use them. I've been thinking about you, thinking about me, thinking that you could be real with me, but you gotta trust me. We're about to break through. Baby, don't you hold me, 'cause I know you're gonna like that. What is good for you is good for me, is good, so I am.
Alright, so now that we're back in our project, the first thing I did before dropping in any of the stems or opening up any instruments was I dragged the BPM down to 92 because that was the original BPM of the track, and then in the piano roll I went to the helpers tab, scale highlighting, and the key of the track was B flat minor, and so I put that into the helpers so that all the keys of B flat minor would be highlighted for me and make things super simple. I don't do remixes super often, so I wasn't really planning on messing with the key of the samples or anything. I ended up switching the BPM, but yeah, I kept it in B flat minor just to make things easier for me. Hopefully that wasn't too lazy of me. So yeah, I said I really like the vocal, so that's really the main thing I ended up working with. You had to use 2 stems from the original track, and so I used the vocal and then this little sticks percussion during the drop for some of the fills, and that came out pretty nice. So let's just start hopping into each of these tracks and seeing what we did. So like I said, didn't really switch up the key of the vocal. However, once I switched everything to 92 beats per minute, then I dragged in the sample, and then I switched the stretch mode on the vocal to stretch instead of resample or auto, whatever it defaults to. By putting it in at 92 beats per minute, it would already be aligned to the grid, and then putting it in stretch mode, if I changed the BPM, the pitch of the sample wouldn't change at all, and the duration of the sample wouldn't change at all. So it would stay aligned to the grid perfectly, and it would stay in B flat minor and make things really easy for me to work with. And so yeah, I changed the BPM to 127 to make it a bit of a more upbeat house track. And so yeah, let's listen to what I did with the vocal.
Tell me all your secrets. Wanna go the deepest. I've been thinking about you.
So I sent it to a mixer track, and then that mixer track, I took it off the master bus and then sent it to 2 different mixer tracks, a dry track and then a wet track. And so not really anything going on the original. And then the dry one, I just put a limiter. Yeah, I actually didn't really do much limiting, actually. I did more just sidechain compression. And then I did no EQing on it. I thought it already sounded pretty nice. The sample was super quiet, so I actually boosted the volume a little bit just with 2 fruity balances, and then the vocal wet is where I do a little more craziness. So these are all 3 different effect chains affecting this one mixer track for the vocal. So if we get rid of the dry, we just have a distorted and compressed OTT signal, and then using this balance to mix it in, and then a Serum FX with a flanger and an OTT or multiband compressor being mixed in with this fruity balance, and then a bit of delay, wet only, dry all the way down, so it's just delay, none of the original signal. That's what we have the dry bus for. That's being mixed in, and then one other fruity balance after the individual ones for the effects to control all of their volume and mix it in with the dry signal. And so all together,
Tell me all your secrets.
let's take these off real quick.
Tell me all your secrets. Tell me all your secrets. Wanna go the deepest. I've been thinking about you.
So that's the original.
Tell me all your secrets. Wanna go the deepest. I've been thinking about you.
So a bit louder and a bit spacier, I guess. So yeah, that's all I really did with the vocal, and I think I only ended up using the verse from the vocal. The chorus, for whatever reason, just sounded odd. But
Now that you own, now that you
they also already had a chop in there,
now that you own, now that you own.
which I sliced up just a little bit to match the beat of whatever else was going on to create some silence for the snare. So yeah, that's all I really did for the vocal. Pretty simple stuff. Next, let's go to the kick. So the kick, I just found a nice sample from some sample pack I downloaded. I actually dragged the input volume down a little bit and then even turned the pitch down just to match it with the rest of the track. And I didn't actually do any sort of key finding for it. I just sort of pitched it down to what sounded best by ear and then kept the stretch mode on auto. That just seemed to sound good, I guess. So it's just a kick. I have it being completely merged into mono through the mixer track, fruity balance, just dragging down the volume even more, I guess. And then that's being sent to a kick bus, which has an EQ, but that's not doing anything. And then this titanium bastard plugin, which is a free like analog bass booster, I guess. So you just use this to pick a frequency, so I guess 60 hertz, and then I boost it a little bit using this knob, and then this attention knob, I guess, is sort of like a bandwidth, so I think that makes it a little more narrow. So this is with it, without it. So just creating a little more thickness in that low end. So yeah, nothing fancy there. And you'll see what my approach to the mix in this track was to keep it super simple. I didn't want to do a ton of like saturation or compression in the mix. I was actually going to save that for the master, have a super dry mix so that in my master I could really bring out life and just throw a bunch of different plugins doing a little bit here and there that would add together and bring out a ton of character. So yeah, that's the kick. Next, I think let's find a snare. So these percussion, like snare and hi-hats and stuff, I think all I really did on the individual tracks was just EQing, a little bit of panning on the hi-hats, and these 2 percussions, not sure what those are. And then what I did is I actually sent them to 2 different buses, and so I have this regular drum bus and then a drum smack bus. The regular drum bus, this is a pretty dry, boringly mixed FX chain for all the drums minus the kick. So that's playing, or that's activated during the intro and like the build-up of the song, and so that during the drop I turn on the drum smack bus, and then that has this little radiator, which is adding some saturation, just like a lot of analog warmth to the drums. And so that activates during the drop just to make them smack a bit harder. Yeah, so you'll see there's two automation clips, drum bus and drum smack bus. And so right at the drop, regular drum bus gets switched off, and then drum smack bus gets turned on. And so yeah, that's just to help make the drums hit a little bit harder during the drop and make the drop seem like it has more energy than the build-up. There's just some sparse some really basic drums in the beginning, and then I found this loop on Splice for the build-up, just to make it a little bit more fun. And then same thing with the drop, I used a different loop. And so one of the things I did with these drums is I think I mixed this loop to the left a little bit, and then I mixed the hi-hats that I had to the right a little bit, and so that kind of just made the drum seem a bit wider on the drop. Just make them fill out that stereo space a little bit more. So yeah, let's move on. So next on the build-up, I have this top lead. Alright, so yeah, this is kind of cool, distorted, reverbed out top lead that I created in Serum. So you hear there's a little bit of automation going just to sort of modulate it throughout the track, give it a little more character, not make it seem so like stagnant, I guess. Something I've been liking to do with these top leads recently is I'll kind of just go in and I'll use sort of just basic waveforms, and then just throw a bunch of reverb at the beginning of the FX chain, and then some distortion, a little bit of multiband compression, and then whatever else just to sort of brighten up that reverb that's being applied to the sound. And that just like washes it out, but then with the distortion and the compression, sort of brings it back up into your face again and just adds a bunch of like those cool, crunchy, distorted artifacts. There's actually like two different versions of this lead, I think. So there's that lower one, and then there's this one which is playing the same melody, but I actually went in and raised the semitones up by 7, and so that puts it up by a fifth, and sort of, I guess, makes it like jazzier. I'll say that. I don't really know. That just gives it a cool alternate sound at this little breakdown. Don't think I did a ton in the effects chain. Again, yeah, just taking out some low end, just keeping things super simple. Let's go to the chords. All right, so first it's playing an octave lower at this intro portion of the song. And let's take a look at the Serum preset. So just 2 saw waves with 16 voices. It's got a filter. It's actually a pretty simple patch. Just a lot of the modulation and like coolness is coming from these macro knobs. This first one is controlling part of the filter and the detune on the first oscillator, and then a mix for a flanger and distortion on the effects chain. And then the second macro, I think, just controls a phaser and a second filter. And so the second filter is sort of what gives it that whop, that attack or pluckiness. So you can see it, this LFO affecting the cutoff filter. Yeah, this macro 2 is... This macro 2 actually takes it off and then boosts this phaser up. And then... And so yeah, this just gives opens up the sound. The filter here. And then one of the other modulations is I have this super fast LFO modulating the fine tune on both of the saw waves. So yeah, that's the lower portion. And then this second half is just raised an octave up, but I'm pretty sure it's like the same lead. And then we can take a look at the actual chords, I guess. Again, I wrote it in B flat, and I was kind of just playing around with the notes in B flat and found these three to work together pretty well. And my idea going in was sort of just this like dark, deep descending house track. So once I found these three notes, I thought I had a good starting point. And then typically when I build chords, I'm not like a music theory genius or anything. I actually barely know anything. I'll kind of just start building triads on top of my root notes and just sort of switching around between major or minor. And then just seeing what sounds good. And then sometimes I'll do like inversions or something, but I don't think I actually really attempted that with this track. And so then once I get those like triads down, then I'll just sort of add a couple notes on top to see if I can get something that sounds even cooler and more complex than your basic triad. So this is what I came up with. And so I had this first half. When I was listening to the vocal behind it, I was just hearing a second half that just like built a little more tension, like upwards, I guess. And then that would help just bring things back down, if that made any sense. Probably not. So yeah, let's listen to the first and second half now. So yeah, I thought that was just these two notes here. Switching those up just made a cool little alternation, and I guess this C also moved up from B flat. So that's pretty much all I did with the chords. And then there's just this bass, which is the same basses in the drop, but just filtered out.
Tell me all your secrets. Are you gonna like that? What is good for me? Tell me all your problems.
So yeah, let's get into the drop. I showed you the drums already. Show you first this little kalimba or kalimbus, and it's just a preset, Celeste preset in mallets in this cheap Expand 2 plugin. I find it nice just for some basic real world sounds sometimes. And this was really the only sound that I really affected that much, just because it was like just a sort of cheap kalimba. So yeah, let's see, I did a bit of EQing, taking out some low end, some of these like mid highs, and then boosting the air. Then I limited it just to really compress the sound without affecting the envelope at all, trying just to make it like as consistent as possible. So then I used another one of these little radiators to add some saturation and, again, analog character, then some OTT, just 10% depth, and then brought down the in gain and the time a little bit just to catch the transients a little more. And then this J37 vinyl emulation plugin, which I used to like slow it down, and then just sort of messed around with these different knobs to see what cool effects I could get. So that's no effects. Then it looks like another EQ. Again, taking out some of that low end and then just attenuating the mids and the high. But yeah, let's look back at this J37. Yeah, I think we're just messing with this wow and flutter, which just creates these cool like pitch modulations in your audio, and then saturation just brings out some character. And then yeah, that's really all I did, and then just played around with the different formulas. So that's what I did with the kalimba. Then I have a vocal chop, which was just, I think, a 4 or 8 bar loop from the vocal that I saved into like my packs. And then I went and dragged the sample into an instance of Slice X. It auto chopped it for me and didn't mess with any of the chops. Just went into the piano roll and started clicking through and looking for different vocal samples that I liked. As I played the beat, I just start tapping them in until I found a melody that sounded good. So the other thing I did was I copied the Slice X, and then this second one is actually an octave higher in pitch. And so that just added a little more top end, but then they're both being sent to the same vocal 2 track, which is being sent to 2 different buses like our regular vocal, and then those 2 are being sent to a vocal all track, which is then being sent back to the master. So again, just not really any EQing on the first mixer track, a little bit of limiting to pump out that sound a little more, some fruity balance to boost up. Oh, actually, that one brings it down. I don't really know what I was doing there. Then another patcher with another little radiator just to really bring out some saturation, some heat. Yeah, I have the wet turned all the way up, and that's just really crunching up the sound. Brought the volume down using this as sort of a post gain, and then a Serum FX after that, which, yeah, not even compressing, just using some distortion. So I'm filtering the distortion to just really crunch and bring out some resonance in the vocal chain. The frick? Ah! And then I have OTT after that with just 13% depth, and then bringing down that in gain a little bit. So then I have the vocal wet, which there's some reverb that gets automated in there during the drop. I have an EQ just to slice out some frequencies that I didn't really want conflicting with the dry signal. I have a phaser that's 100% wet, adding some modulation, and then a bunch of distortion actually mixed in after that. Fruity balance to mix in how much of those I wanted onto the actual track. And then an OTT again with 11% depth, bringing down the in gain a little bit. And I just really like these OTTs with a little bit of depth, just to add a little bit of extra character and constrain your sound a little more, make it a little more consistent. And then Fruity Balance, which I'm using to mix it all in to the dry signal. And then these are both being sent to the vocal all, which has a limiter that is side chaining the vocal chops. Some EQing just to get rid of that low end so it doesn't conflict with the basses, and then boosting some air, attenuating some mid lows and some of the mid highs. That's about it for the vocal chops. Take another listen. That's without the higher one. And so I also, before this drop, just created a very simple like riser with this vocal chop, and you'll see the velocities are being automated, so just like sort of fades in.
But you gotta trust me. We're about to break through. Baby, don't hold back, 'cause I know you're gonna like that.
Alright, so next up we have our bass. So this bass is made out of two different sounds. So this first bass is like a super wide sort of a Reese bass, I guess. This is what we got with just this sound. And so it sounds pretty weak on its own. Yeah, it's just this two different oscillators in Serum with a bunch of unison, 16 on a saw wave, and then this anti-stasis waveform with something automating the wavetable position. Yeah, that's automating that. And then another sort of plucky filter automating the cutoff, and then a macro automating the cutoff, which is automated in the track, and then just some multiband compression just to sort of add some life to that bass. Some mid-side EQ going on, which you can see you can actually build inside of Patcher. So that's cutting out all the low end, or all that super low end, and then boosting some of the highs, and then nothing really happening on the mid signal. This is then being sent to a bass bus where nothing done with the EQ there. Use another titanium bastard thing to boost higher bass frequencies. Again, just choosing the frequency, it's like 100 hertz, and then boosting it a little bit with that knob. Using this Fruity Balance to gain stage, and then yeah. So see, we actually cut out a ton of low end here. We just kind of wanted this like lower mid fuzz, and then a limiter doing some side chaining. So yeah, we cut out all that low end because then I have this thick old sub sort of filling up that area, but you'll see it's really only like a couple frequencies showing up there. Use the limiter to really squash the signal, make it more consistent, and then sent it to a sub bass bus. Not really doing any EQ in there. Nothing there. And then this titanium bastard thing. Which really just sort of just adds some grit, makes it a bit more aggressive. Thickens it up a little more. And then another fruity limiter, doing some side chain to the kick, and that's really all for the bass. It's a super simple pattern, just following the root notes of the chord progression with a couple extra notes added in there. That's pretty much it for the drop. There's just some effects going on. I downloaded from Splice. We got the sticks percussion, which all I really did was just add OTT with a bit more depth than I usually go for, just to really like thicken up the sound. And then it comes in again over here. There's this little stab from that top lead. This automation's automating the cutoff macro with the bass. And yeah, super simple drop. This section's just the drum loop from the build-up and then clap. Just the clap on the 4, I believe. And then their vocal chop that they supplied. Just some more effects that I found from Splice. I don't know, the second build-up's pretty simple. Just the chords and the top synth, and then a couple different effects with a snare buildup I found on Splice and another uplifter. Not too much different with the second drop, except I took out the stabs from the top synth. And then at the beginning of the drop, I added in this like big, wide horn thing. Just to, I don't know, just switch things up a little more. Add some more impact. And then there's just a continuation, which brings in the chords and the top synth, and then another little synth underneath it. Just to add some support. And then added in this simplified vocal chop on the 2 and 4. I just added a little bit of rhythm. But yeah, it's really a pretty simple track. One of the only other things I did was before each of the drops on the build-up, see, I send everything to a pre-master. This switches on through an automation clip, this reverb, the room size, decay time, and wet level get automated up as the drop's approaching. The low end gets cut out, a little bit of the high end gets filtered out. The stereo merges to sort of condense the track right before the drop, and then I use a fruity balance to drop the volume a tad bit so that it automates back up really quickly right at the drop, and it just impacts 10 times harder.
But you gotta trust me. We are about to break through.
So this is without it.
'Cause I know you're gonna like that. What is good for you is good for me, is good, so I am.
This is with
But you
it.
gotta trust me. We are about to break through. Baby, don't you hold back. 'Cause I know you're gonna like that. What is good for you is good for me, is good, so I am.
Show you that in Spain.
But you gotta trust me. We are about to break through. Baby, don't you hold back.
You
'Cause I know
see,
you're gonna like that.
top end's getting filtered out,
Good for you
low
is
end's
good for me,
decreasing,
is good, so I am.
volume drops. So that's about all I did for the mix. One of the other things I'll actually touch on real quick is before I jumped into the master, I wanted to make sure that throughout the entire track, the highest volume point never exceeds 0. And I actually,
But you gotta trust me.
I think I aimed for around -3 or -6 dB. So this way there's absolutely no possible clipping that can occur, so that when you go to master, you can really crank everything up as much as you want.
But you gotta trust me. We are about to break through. Baby, don't you hold back, 'cause I know you're gonna like that. What is good for you is good for me, is good, so I am.
So yeah, just before I jumped into the master, I just wanted to make sure the entire track did not exceed 0 decibels. So yeah, then I bounced it all down and then opened up a new file to master in. Now let's listen to the master.
Tell me all your secrets, wanna go the deepest. I've been thinking about you.
Hits a lot harder. So let's see what we did. I sent the track to a mixer track instead of just the master. And so then I sent that to a pre-master. So like I said, or was saying during the mix, I wanted to keep it as like bare bones as I possibly could. Didn't want a ton of saturation or compression. So that way the track was super dry. That would give me a ton of space to add on different effects. And what I did with these different effects is I only like turned them up a tiny bit. I only mixed them in like a smidgen. What happens when you use like compressors and analog emulations and stuff is when you just do a little bit with each, is it compresses the track slightly. And so instead of using one compressor to like completely slam your track and just make it sound like shit, you take just a combination of a bunch of different plugins to do a little bit of compression, a little bit of saturation, a little bit of distortion, a little bit of EQing, and doing just a little bit of with each adds into just a ton of character. So let's turn off all these effects.
Tell me all your secrets, wanna go the deepest. I've been thinking about you. Tell me all your problems, 'cause I can really use them.
All right, so first we have this J37, which I'm just doing a little bit of saturation, adding a tiny bit of flutter with the depth and a tiny bit of wow. Again, that just like creates these little pitch artifacts. And then I kept the speed at 15 IPS because dropping it to 7.5 on faster tracks like 127 sort of just like slows it down and makes it sound a little bit wonky. And then just played around with the different formulas to see what I liked. And so that sounds like this. And so didn't really do much, but just adding on that plugin brought out a bunch of warmth. So next we got OTT, which just adding in 2% depth and bringing down the in gain by 0.2 decibels. And just thickening up our song just a tiny bit, adding in just some more life. Next up, I got this free SGA 1566 plugin, which is a analog pre-gain like emulator, and it's actually probably one of the best plugins I've found in terms of sound quality, but it is super CPU intensive, so watch out. Really quick, let's listen to a before and after. And so you'll hear that I actually brought down the volume quite a bit. I think I did that on purpose so that I could boost it more later. But yeah, this thing just really helps add more grit to your track, and it just does a really great job of compressing everything, but without being an actual compressor. So my thought process behind using this was bring down the input gain a ton because my track was already pretty loud, and so that way I'm not like pumping it through the plugin and making it do more than I actually want it to do. And so that way I can attenuate these different bass, treble, and gain knobs just to see what different flavors I could add to the track. And then tried using the output gain just to bring the volume back up a little bit. And so yeah, I think I used that to purposely bring the volume down a little bit more so that I could boost it more at the end. And so then next I got this little radiator, which just adds more analog distortion, brought the mix down pretty far, just because, again, we don't want it doing too much. And then the CLA 76 compressor. Which this is where the volume gets brought back up a little bit. But then just using a slightly slower attack and then really fast release so that it lets some of the transients in, but then drops back down on them really quick. That just helps keep things snappy but controlled. And then this Coral Baxter little like EQ booster thing, which you'll hear that just brings out a ton of life. And this is another free plugin as well. And so I'm just using these different high and low shelf EQs, selecting where I want them to start EQing at, and then with these two shelf knobs, and then using the gain knobs to boost them. So then that gets sent to this thing, which is just a visualizer I made for fun, which then gets sent to the master, and I do some mid-side EQing, just attenuating some of the low mids and high mids on the mono signal, and then boosting some of the higher frequencies, cutting down some of the air, and then on the side signal, cutting out all the bass frequencies below 50 hertz, some more attenuation in the lows, high mids, and then boosting the air and some of that mid section. And then I use a Maximus, which I turn all the compressors off, and then I go through the bands, and I'll use the stereo controls, and for the low I'll usually merge it a little bit so it makes it more mono, makes it a bit tighter, this low band, your low frequencies. And then with the mid section, just a tiny bit of stereo spreading, which is this middle area, orange band. And then the high band, I did more stereo separation, so it really makes it feel wider. So let's take these two plugins off, see what those sound like. So this mid side really does a good job of tightening the low end. And then, again, the stereo spreader just sort of controls things even more. Finally, this is where I start boosting the volume, and it's a pretty simple setup. I just use an Ozone 8 Elements maximizer, turn on true peaks, bring down the character as fast as possible, bring the ceiling to -0.1 decibels so that way we never exceed 0 dB, and then not bringing down the threshold at all because I don't really want this limiter to do anything. I'm going to be doing the volume boosting with two fruity soft clippers. Pretty much all I did with these guys is I have one with a really soft threshold and then one with a harder threshold, and just started cranking up the volume as loud as I could before I thought it was too much or it started sounding like over limited or too distorted or clippy. Probably could have made it louder, but I played it safe and just wanted a solid sounding track, and I think I got it. Well, there you have it, my friends. That is the end of my remix breakdown. I just want to give a huge thank you and a huge shout out to Minder and the team at Metabop and the team that put together this remix competition. These stems were a lot of fun to work with. Just want to say good luck to all the other competitors, all the other people who entered in a remix as well. I listened to a bunch of them, and there's quite a few that really stood out to me, and so, you know, of course, I'm hoping that I win, but good luck to the rest of you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you were able to learn something from this long-ass video, and to all the people who listened to my remix, thank you so much for your support, and yeah, let's hope we win this thing. Have a great day, guys, and get back to producing.